My name is Leah Morgan, and I'm 29 years old. Last weekend, my parents made me cook and clean for my brother's engagement party. 60 guests. 3 days of preparation. Every single dish is made from scratch. And somehow, despite the fact that I had been running around their house since Friday morning, by Saturday night my mother was still telling people I was currently between jobs. She didn't whisper it either. She said it loudly. Casually. Like it was a funny little fact about me. Leah's helping out this weekend, she told a group of guests standing near the patio doors. She has plenty of free time these days. Several people chuckled politely. I stood in the kitchen doorway holding a tray of champagne flutes, wearing an apron dusted with flour, and felt something inside me quietly fracture. What my mother didn't know was that 2 hours earlier, an email had arrived in my inbox. A contract. $240,000. And what nobody in that house knew, not my parents, not my brother, not any of their well-dressed guests sipping champagne on the patio, was that the man who had sent that contract was standing 10 feet away in the living room, listening to every word they said about me. Before I tell you what happened when the truth finally came out, take a moment to subscribe to Women Reddit Stories if you enjoy stories about people finally standing up for themselves. Now let me tell you how everything started unraveling. It began 11 days before the engagement party with a text message from my mother at 9:42 p.m. Ethan and Sophie's engagement party is next Saturday. 60 guests. You'll handle the food and setup. No one can help you. Not are you available. Just a statement. A decision already made. I was sitting at my desk in my apartment in Seattle, surrounded by open design files across 2 monitors. My apartment smelled faintly of cold coffee and printer ink, the scent of long nights and deadlines. I had been working non-stop for nearly 2 weeks on a project that could completely change my career. My laptop screen displayed the branding concept I'd been refining for Aurora Dynamics, a fast-growing tech firm preparing for a major expansion. Their CEO had personally asked to review my proposal. My presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning. I stared at my mother's text message for a long moment before typing back. Mom, I'm actually in the middle of a huge work project. Is there any way? Her reply came before I finished the sentence. Honey, you work from home. You have flexibility. Ethan and Sophie are overwhelmed planning the wedding already. There it was. Flexibility. My mother's favorite word. What it really meant was, your work isn't as important. This wasn't new. Last Thanksgiving, I cooked dinner for 18 people while Ethan poured drinks and accepted compliments about his promotion at his finance firm. At Christmas, I'd spent 2 days designing and printing personalized menus for the family dinner. When guests complimented them, my mother smiled and said, "Oh yes, Leah's always been artistic." Artistic. Not professional. Not successful. Just artistic. I looked back at my computer screen. The Aurora Dynamics pitch deck said half finished. If they approved it, the contract would be worth more than any project I'd ever worked on. 4 days to perfect it. 4 days to secure the biggest opportunity of my life. And somehow I still heard myself typing. Okay. Send me the menu details. The grocery list arrived at 12:17 a.m. 3 full pages. Appetizers for 60 people. A plated dinner. 3 dessert options. At the bottom, a cheerful little note from my mother. Sophie's parents are very sophisticated. Let's make sure everything feels elegant. The next morning I woke up at 6 a.m. and drove to 2 different grocery stores before opening my laptop for work. By Thursday morning, I was presenting my brand strategy to the Aurora executive team through Zoom. Half the ingredients for Saturday's party were sitting in coolers beside my kitchen table. My presentation had just reached the final slide when a new face appeared in the meeting. Mid-50s. Sharp navy suit. Confident posture. The kind of presence that made the entire room go quieter. "Good morning," he said calmly. I'm Daniel Whitaker. I oversee final approvals here. The CEO. My heart hammered as he reviewed my slides in silence. Then he leaned back slightly. Ms. Morgan, he said. Yes. This is exceptional work. I blinked. You've captured our brand voice better than agencies we've paid millions to. A ripple of agreement moved through the executives. Thank you, I said carefully. Whitaker glanced at his calendar. I'll actually be in Seattle this weekend visiting an old friend. We should meet in person to finalize the contract. My pulse jumped. That would be great, I said. Although Saturday might be difficult. My brother's engagement party. Oh. Yes. Family obligation. He smiled faintly. Family first. I respect that. Then he added casually. My friend hosting the dinner, James Morgan. Any relation? My stomach dropped. That's my father. Whitaker laughed quietly. Well, that's quite a coincidence. The meeting ended 15 minutes later. I sat staring at the screen, still processing what had just happened, when my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Did you remember Sophie wants gluten-free desserts? I hadn't even known she wanted desserts. But nobody had asked if I could make them. Friday morning, I arrived at my parents' house at 7 a.m. By noon I'd already prepped 4 trays of appetizers. By evening the kitchen looked like a catering operation. Saturday morning I started cooking at 6 a.m. At 10 a.m., Ethan came downstairs in sweatpants. Morning, he said, pouring himself coffee. He glanced at the counter. Oh, by the way, Sophie just told me 2 of her coworkers are vegan. I stared at him. I've already bought everything. Yeah, but you're creative, he said easily. You'll figure it out. By 2 p.m., the house was full. Elegant dresses. Tailored suits. People discussing venture capital and stock portfolios. I moved through the rooms refilling glasses, carrying trays, and slipping back into the kitchen every few minutes to check on the food. Most of the guests assumed I was the caterer. Then I heard my mother's voice from the patio. Leah's helping us out tonight, she told someone warmly. She's still figuring out her career path. Polite laughter followed. I froze in the hallway. Across the room, standing beside my father with a glass of scotch in his hand, was Daniel Whitaker. And he was watching me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Daniel Whitaker stood beside my father near the living room windows, a glass of scotch in his hand, studying the room with the calm, observant expression of someone who noticed everything. Including me. Including the flour on my apron. Including the tray of drinks balanced in my hands. And, most likely, including my mother's cheerful voice explaining to guests that I was still figuring out my career path. My father clapped Whitaker on the shoulder, laughing about something from their college days, completely unaware of the tension building 10 feet away. I turned quickly and retreated into the kitchen. The moment the door swung shut behind me, I set the tray on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink. My heart was racing. This wasn't how our meeting was supposed to happen. Tomorrow morning, I had imagined walking into Aurora Dynamics' sleek downtown office wearing a tailored blazer, portfolio in hand, ready to discuss brand strategy and contract details as a professional equal. Instead, the CEO of that company had just watched my parents introduce me to their guests as the unemployed daughter helping with party food. I exhaled slowly. Okay. Fine. Just get through the night. The oven timer beeped sharply beside me, snapping me back into motion. The roasted vegetables were ready. The main course, 2 large herb-crusted salmon fillets, needed another 20 minutes. Dessert still had to be plated. And there were already dirty dishes piling up in the sink. I had just started rinsing plates when the kitchen door creaked open. A woman stepped inside. Early 60s, elegant gray hair, warm smile. Oh my goodness, she said, glancing around at the counters covered in trays and mixing bowls. Did you make all of this yourself? I nodded. Yes. Her eyebrows lifted. For 60 people? Something like that. That's impressive, she said sincerely. Are you a professional chef? I wiped my hands on a dish towel. No. I'm actually a brand designer. Oh. Her expression brightened with interest. That sounds fascinating. Finally. Someone curious instead of dismissive. I opened my mouth to explain. Leah. My mother's voice rang from the hallway. She appeared in the doorway moments later, wearing a navy cocktail dress and the bright, socially polished smile she used when guests were nearby. There you are, she said. Then she turned to the woman beside me. Margaret, I see you've met my daughter. Margaret nodded warmly. We were just talking about her design work. My mother laughed lightly. Oh yes, Leah does little freelance projects from home. The warmth drained from Margaret's face almost instantly, replaced by polite neutrality. Oh, she said. My mother patted my shoulder. She's always been creative. Creative. There it was again. Creative means hobby. Creative meant not serious. Creative meant not real. My mother gently guided Margaret back toward the living room. Let me introduce you to Ethan and Sophie, she said brightly. They're the reason for tonight's celebration. The kitchen fell quiet again. I stood there staring at the half-plated dessert tray. Little freelance projects. I had spent the last 8 years building my business. Working nights. Working weekends. Learning marketing strategy, branding psychology, consumer behavior. Building a client list one project at a time. But in my parents' world, unless your job came with a corporate office and a pension plan, it wasn't real. The kitchen door opened again. I braced myself for another request. But this time it wasn't my mother. It was Daniel Whitaker. He stepped inside quietly, closing the door behind him. For a second neither of us spoke. Then he glanced around the kitchen. You made all of this? Yes. For the entire party? Yes. He nodded slowly. That explains the smell. I couldn't tell if he meant it as a compliment. I didn't realize your father was James Morgan, he continued calmly. I didn't realize you were his old college friend, I replied. He smiled slightly. Small world. I nodded. Very small. He studied the counters again. Appetizers, plated dinner, desserts, he said. That's a lot of work. It's a family event. Yes, he said thoughtfully. Through the kitchen doorway we could hear my mother laughing again in the living room. You know Leah, she was telling someone. Always experimenting with little art projects. Whitaker's expression didn't change, but I saw the slight tightening at the corner of his mouth. I assume, he said quietly, that's not how Aurora Dynamics describes your work. I let out a short breath. No. He leaned casually against the counter. For what it's worth, he said, the brand identity presentation you gave yesterday was the strongest proposal we've received in 3 years. Thank you. I meant what I said in the meeting. Your work is exceptional. The word hung in the air for a moment. Exceptional. No one in my family had ever used that word to describe my career. Whitaker checked his watch. I won't keep you, he said. It looks like you have a small restaurant to run. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth despite everything. Something like that. Before leaving, he paused near the door. One more thing. Yes? I built Aurora Dynamics from a spare bedroom, he said. My parents thought I was unemployed for 2 years. I blinked. Really? They kept asking when I was going to get a real job. I laughed quietly. That sounds familiar. He nodded once. See you tomorrow morning, Ms. Morgan. Then he stepped back into the party. I turned toward the oven just as the timer began beeping again. The salmon was ready. I pulled the trays out carefully. Perfect. Golden crust. Exactly the way it should be. For a moment I stood there looking at the food. Then I grabbed the serving platter. If I had to get through the rest of this party, I would at least finish what I started. I carried the salmon into the dining room. Conversation paused as I set the platter down. Someone clapped lightly. "Looks amazing," a guest said. My father smiled proudly at the food. "Leah's always been good in the kitchen." Good in the kitchen. I forced a polite smile and turned to leave. "Actually," my mother said behind me. I stopped. "We'll need coffee soon." She said it the way someone gives instructions to staff. "Regular for most people," she continued. "But Mrs. Turner only drinks decaf, and I think Daniel prefers espresso." I glanced at the kitchen clock. 7:02 p.m. I had been working since 6 that morning. 12 hours. Without sitting once. "Mom," I said carefully, "I still have dessert on the plate." "Well, hurry," she said lightly. "Guests are starting to ask." I nodded and walked back toward the kitchen. But as I reached the hallway, I heard Ethan speaking quietly to Sophie near the staircase. "Don't worry," he said. "Leah's got it handled." I paused. Handled. Like I was the hired help. Not family. Something inside me shifted slightly. A quiet, unfamiliar thought begins to form. I stepped into the kitchen and closed the door. And for the first time all evening, I checked my phone. A new email notification glowed on the screen. From Daniel Whitaker. Subject: Contract approval. My breath caught. I opened it. Aurora Dynamics is pleased to confirm the final contract value of $240,000 for the comprehensive brand development project. Attached was the full agreement. I stared at the number. $240,000. More than Ethan made in a year. More than my parents had ever imagined I could earn. Sitting quietly in my inbox. While I stood in their kitchen wearing an apron. Outside in the living room, my mother's voice floated down the hallway again. "Leah doesn't really work right now," she was telling someone. "She just helps out where she can." And at that moment, I heard footsteps approaching the kitchen. Fast. Urgent. The door burst open. Ethan stood there, slightly out of breath. "Leah," he said. "The main course, where is it?" I blinked. "It's already on the dining table." "Oh." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, good." Then he hesitated. "Also, Sophie's parents were wondering if you could bring out the dessert early." I stared at him. "It's supposed to come after dinner." "Yeah," he said casually. "But they have another event later." He glanced toward the hallway. "Can you just move things around?" Just move things around. 12 hours of work. And now the schedule could change on a whim. I looked down at the phone still in my hand. At the contract glowing on the screen. $240,000. Then I looked back at my brother. And for the first time all evening, I didn't answer immediately. I didn't answer Ethan right away. He stood in the kitchen doorway waiting, hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets, clearly expecting the same response he'd gotten from me his entire life. "Sure. No problem. I'll handle it." But my phone was still in my hand. And the number on the screen, $240,000, felt like it was glowing. Ethan shifted his weight. "So, can you bring dessert out early?" I looked up at him. "The main course hasn't even been eaten yet." "Yeah, but Sophie's parents have to leave around 8. The cake needs another 30 minutes in the fridge or it'll fall apart." He shrugged. "Then just serve something else first." Something else. Like food magically appeared out of thin air. like I hadn't spent 3 days planning the exact timing of every course. "Ethan," I said slowly, "I've been cooking since 6 this morning. So the food is ready when it's ready." He frowned slightly. "You're being kind of intense tonight." Intense. Right. Because apparently expecting basic respect for 12 hours of work was intense. From the living room, laughter echoed again. Someone called Ethan's name. He glanced toward the hallway. "Look, Leah," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "These people are important to Sophie's family." I stared at him. And it would be really nice if everything ran smoothly tonight. I almost laughed. Everything had run smoothly tonight. Because I had made it run smoothly. I opened my mouth to say something else, but just then my mother's voice cut through the hallway again. "Ethan? In here," he called. A moment later she appeared in the doorway. Her smile disappeared instantly when she saw the tension between us. "What's going on?" "Sophie's parents want dessert early," Ethan said. "Leah says it's not ready." My mother looked at me. "Well, can't you just bring something out?" "The cake needs more time." "Oh, for heaven's sake, Leah." She waved a hand dismissively. "Just improvise." Improvising, apparently, was the solution to everything. A sudden wave of exhaustion rolled over me. "I've already improvised 3 times tonight," I said quietly. My mother's smile tightened. "Honey, there are guests waiting." "I know. And you're the one in charge of the food." In charge. That was an interesting way of describing unpaid labor. "I'm not in charge," I said carefully. "I'm helping." The room went quiet. Ethan glanced between us uncomfortably. "Well," my mother said after a moment, "help faster." Something in my chest went still. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just still. I set my phone on the counter. Outside, plates clinked as guests began eating the salmon I'd prepared. The smell of roasted herbs filled the kitchen. My entire weekend sitting on those tables. 3 days of work. And somehow I was still the one being treated like a problem. "Leah?" My mother's voice sharpened. "Yes?" "Are you going to bring dessert or not?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the careful makeup. The practiced social smile. The way she spoke to me differently when guests were around. And then I thought about the email sitting open on my phone. $240,000. My future sitting quietly in my inbox. While I stood in this kitchen being told to improvise. "I'll bring it out when it's ready," I said calmly. My mother stared at me. "That's not what I asked." "It's the answer." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck again. "Okay, this is getting weird." My mother's voice dropped lower. "Leah. Don't do this right now." "Do what?" "Create drama." Drama. That word again. It was amazing how often people used it when someone simply refused to be pushed around. "I'm not creating drama," I said. "I'm cooking dinner." She leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "There are important people here tonight." I almost laughed again. Important people. I wondered if she realized one of those important people was the man who had just offered me the biggest contract of my life. But she didn't know that. Because she had never asked. From the dining room someone called out cheerfully. "This salmon is incredible." My father's voice followed proudly. "Leah made it." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. The food was impressive. The person who made it was not. My mother straightened. "Just bring the dessert in 10 minutes, she said firmly. Then she turned and walked back into the party. Ethan lingered for another second. "Sorry," he muttered. Then he followed her out. The kitchen fell silent again. I leaned back against the counter and exhaled slowly. Through the doorway I could see guests laughing, eating, drinking. celebrating Ethan and Sophie. Not a single person thinking about the hours of work that had gone into the food in front of them. Except maybe one. A movement near the hallway caught my eye. Daniel Whitaker. He was standing near the living room entrance, talking with my father again. But his eyes flicked toward the kitchen. Toward me. He had probably heard that entire conversation. I looked away quickly and grabbed the dessert trays. Mini lemon tarts. Chocolate mousse cups. And the engagement cake. I plated everything carefully. Even now, part of me still wanted it to look perfect. Because that was the kind of person I was. Capable. Reliable. Flexible. Whitaker's words from earlier echoed quietly in my mind. Talented people often get punished for being capable. I carried the dessert tray into the dining room. Guests applauded lightly again. Wow. This looks amazing. My father beamed. Leah always pulls it together. Pulls it together. Like things simply happened around me. Like effort wasn't involved. I set the desserts on the table. As I turned to leave, a voice spoke quietly behind me. Ms. Morgan. I stopped. Daniel Whitaker stood beside the hallway entrance. Do you have a moment? My heart skipped. I'm in the middle of helping with the party. I noticed. He gestured slightly toward the hallway. Just a minute. I hesitated. Then nodded. We stepped into the quieter hallway. Whitaker glanced back toward the dining room before speaking. I've been listening to the way your family talks about your work tonight. My face flushed. They mean well. He studied me for a moment. No, he said gently. They don't. I didn't know what to say to that. He continued. When I started Aurora Dynamics, my father introduced me to people as my son who hasn't figured things out yet. I looked up. How long did that last? Until the company hit its first 100 million. I blinked. Seriously? He nodded. People understand success when it fits their expectations. He glanced toward the kitchen. You've been cooking for 12 hours. Something like that. And tomorrow morning you're signing a contract worth $250,000. My stomach tightened. Yes. He folded his hands calmly. I hope you understand something. What? The contract isn't a favor. I frowned slightly. I never thought it was. Good, he said. Because we chose you out of 37 candidates. 37. My chest tightened. Your portfolio was the strongest by a wide margin. For a moment I couldn't speak. All those late nights. All those projects. Someone had actually seen it. Whitaker checked his watch. I'll let you get back to the party. He paused before leaving. One piece of advice, Ms. Morgan. Yes? Being capable doesn't mean you're obligated. Then he walked back toward the living room. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, listening to the noise of the party. My mother laughing again. Guests praising the food. My brother accepting congratulations. And something inside me shifted again. Not anger. Not resentment. Just clarity. I turned back toward the kitchen. Because there were still dishes piled in the sink. Still coffee to prepare. Still 2 hours of work left before this party was over. But for the first time all night, I wasn't entirely sure I was going to finish it. By 7:45 p.m., the party had reached that comfortable stage where everyone was relaxed, a little louder, a little warmer from wine and conversation. Dessert plates were half empty. Coffee cups were beginning to appear on the tables. And the kitchen sink was completely full. I stood there rinsing dishes, sleeves rolled up, watching chocolate mousse smear slowly down the drain. Through the open doorway I could hear my parents entertaining guests. My mother's voice carried clearly. You know how creative Leah has always been, she was telling someone. But she's never really wanted a traditional career. Polite laughter followed. I paused with a plate in my hand. Never wanted a traditional career. That was one way of describing the last 8 years of freelance design work. Another way would have been building a business from scratch. But that version never made it into my mother's stories. I dried my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter for a moment. From the dining room, my father's voice chimed in. Leah likes her flexible lifestyle. Flexible. That word again. I wondered if they realized that flexibility was the reason I'd spent the last 12 hours cooking for their party. Or maybe that connection had never occurred to them. Footsteps approached the kitchen. I expected my mother. Instead, it was Sophie. My future sister-in-law stood in the doorway holding an empty dessert plate. She looked slightly flushed from the evening's excitement. The lemon tarts were amazing, she said. Thanks. She hesitated for a second. Ethan said you might be able to make a second batch of coffee. Of course he did. The coffee maker sat empty beside the sink. I'll start another pot, I said. Great, she replied, clearly relieved. She lingered a moment longer. You've done a lot tonight. Yeah. Thank you. The words sounded genuine. But they also sounded like something someone says to a caterer at the end of an event. Not to family. She left the plate on the counter and returned to the dining room. I poured fresh grounds into the coffee machine and started the next pot. The soft gurgling sound filled the kitchen. My phone buzzed quietly on the counter. I glanced down. Another email notification from Aurora Dynamics. Contract copy attached. My eyes drifted back to the number. $240,000. It still felt surreal. A project that could redefine my entire career. And somehow the CEO of that company was currently drinking coffee in my parents' living room while my mother explained to people that I hadn't found my path yet. The coffee machine finished brewing. I poured several cups onto a tray. As I stepped into the hallway, voices from the living room drifted toward me. But Ethan has always been the ambitious one, my mother was saying. I stopped. Not intentionally. Just long enough to hear the rest. He's the one who really went after a serious career, she continued proudly. Someone asked something I couldn't hear. My mother laughed lightly. Oh, Leah's happy doing her little creative projects. Little creative projects. The tray in my hands suddenly felt heavier. Across the room, Daniel Whitaker was standing near the fireplace speaking with my father again. But his attention shifted. He noticed me standing there. And he had definitely heard my mother's comment. Our eyes met briefly. Something in his expression hardened. I walked into the room and set the coffee tray down on the table. Guests began reaching for cups. Perfect timing, someone said. Leah keeps everything running, my father added. Keeps everything running. Not builds brands for technology companies. Not signs six-figure contracts. Just keeps things running. I turned to head back to the kitchen. Leah. My mother's voice stopped me. I turned. She gestured toward the empty coffee tray. Could you run to the store and grab more cream? I blinked. The grocery store? Yes. It's 20 minutes away. Well, guests will want refills, she said simply. I stared at her. You want me to leave the party to buy cream? If it's not too much trouble. The way she said it made it clear she expected the answer to be no trouble at all. I still have dishes to finish, I said carefully. Oh, those can wait, she replied. But the coffee can't? Several guests nearby had gone quiet. My mother's smile stiffened slightly. Leah, please don't make this difficult. There it was. Difficult. Another favorite word. Difficult meant, not immediately compliant. I glanced around the room. 50 people. Beautiful clothes. Wine glasses. Laughter. and me standing there in a flower-streaked apron. Across the room, Whitaker was watching the exchange carefully. My father cleared his throat. Leah, it's just a quick run. Just. Always just. Just one more thing. Just a quick favor. Just a small adjustment. Just 12 hours of unpaid work. Something inside my chest tightened. I've already been working all day, I said quietly. My mother lowered her voice. We all have responsibilities tonight. I almost laughed. We? She frowned. Yes. What responsibilities have you had tonight? The room went very quiet. My father shifted uncomfortably. Leah, he said, warning in his voice. But the words were already out. I've cooked every dish in this house, I continued calmly. I've been cleaning, serving, refilling drinks, plating desserts. Because you offered to help, my mother interrupted sharply. I stared at her. No. You did. No, I said again. You told me to. The silence deepened. Guests exchanged glances. My mother's smile had completely disappeared now. Leah, she said tightly, you're embarrassing yourself. I felt strangely calm. Am I? Yes. I'm standing in a room full of people listening to my parents describe my career like it's a hobby. My voice was steady. That's embarrassing. My father stepped forward. Okay, he said quietly. Let's talk about this later. Later. Always later. Later never came. Why later? I asked. Because we have guests, my mother snapped. And family disagreements don't happen in front of guests. I looked around the room. At the 50 people watching. At the half-empty plates. At the coffee cups I'd just served. At what point, I asked quietly, did I stop being family? The words landed harder than I expected. No one spoke. My brother finally stood up from the table. Leah, he said carefully. What? You're making a scene. I looked at him. I've been working since 6 this morning. That's your choice. The sentence hung in the air. My choice. I slowly reached up and untied the apron around my waist. Every eye in the room followed the movement. What are you doing? My mother asked. I folded the apron neatly. Then I set it on the table beside the empty coffee tray. Dessert is finished, I said calmly. Coffee's brewed. There are clean plates in the kitchen. My mother stared at me. You're not serious. I am. You can't just walk away. Watch me. My father stepped forward again. Leah, let's be reasonable. I've been reasonable for 29 years. The front door was only a few steps away. Where do you think you're going? My mother demanded. Home. If you walk out that door. She stopped herself. But it was too late. The sentence had already formed in her mind. If you walk out that door, she finished, don't expect to come back. The room held its breath. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Then I turned back to her. Okay, I said. And the silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, nobody moved. 50 people stood frozen in my parents' living room, watching a family argument that had suddenly become something much bigger. My mother blinked at me. Okay, she repeated. Yes. Her mouth opened slightly. You're saying okay? You said not to come back if I leave, I replied calmly. So I'm saying okay. The confusion on her face was almost surreal. It was like she had expected the threat to work the way it always had before. To make me pause. Apologize. Back down. But something fundamental had shifted. Behind me, the door was still open. Cool Seattle evening air drifted into the hallway. My brother stood slowly from his chair. Leah, wait. I looked at him. What? You can't just walk out in the middle of the party. I'm not hosting the party. You basically are. No, I said quietly. I'm the one who cooked for it. He rubbed his forehead. People are still eating. The food's already on the table. What about cleanup? I blinked. Are you serious? Well, someone has to. You're all adults, I interrupted. You can figure out how to wash dishes. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My father stepped forward again. Leah, let's not make rash decisions. I've been thinking about this for hours. Then think a little longer. I shook my head. I already did. My mother's voice was tight now. You're acting like a child. No, I said. I'm acting like someone who just realized she's been treated like hired help. That's ridiculous. Is it? I gestured toward the dining table. I cooked everything in this house. I served every drink. I've been cleaning dishes for 3 hours. And during all of that, I added quietly, you've been telling people I don't have a real job. The room went silent again. My mother flushed slightly. That's not what I said. You said I was still figuring things out. Well, you are. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The Aurora Dynamics email was still open. I held the screen up. Actually, I said calmly, I figured something out about 2 hours ago. My brother frowned. What? I turned the phone so he could see. His eyes scanned the screen. Then widened. Wait. He leaned closer. $240,000? Several guests nearby leaned in slightly. What? My mother demanded. Ethan looked up at her. Leah just signed a contract with Aurora Dynamics. The room erupted in quiet murmurs. My father frowned. What's Aurora Dynamics? Before I could answer, a voice spoke calmly behind him. It's my company. Everyone turned. Daniel Whitaker stepped forward from near the fireplace. My father blinked. Chris, Daniel, what? Whitaker nodded politely. Yes. He looked directly at my parents. Leah and I have been negotiating a brand development contract for the past month. The silence in the room deepened. My mother's face drained of color. What kind of contract? She asked. Whitaker didn't raise his voice. But somehow every person in the room heard him clearly. A $240,000 brand strategy project. Gasps rippled through the guests. Someone whispered, that's huge. My father stared at me. Leah, is that true? Yes. How long has this been happening? 3 weeks. My mother looked stunned. You never told us. I tried, I said quietly. But you told me I had flexibility. Whitaker watched the exchange silently. Then he spoke again. Your daughter is one of the most talented brand designers we've interviewed in years. My father blinked again. Interviewed? Yes, Whitaker said. We evaluated 37 candidates. A murmur spread across the room. Whitaker continued calmly. Leah's portfolio was the strongest by a significant margin. My brother looked between us. You're serious? Very. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You never said anything. I did, I replied. You just didn't ask questions. Across the room, one of Sophie's coworkers spoke quietly. Aurora Dynamics is huge. Someone else added, their branding contracts are incredibly competitive. My mother looked like she might faint. But Leah works from home. Whitaker raised an eyebrow slightly. Yes. That's where most designers work. The room went quiet again. My father shifted awkwardly. Well, we didn't realize it was that serious. Whitaker tilted his head slightly. That's because you never asked. His tone wasn't angry. Just factual. And somehow that made it worse. My mother looked at me again. Why didn't you say something tonight? I stared at her. I told you I had an important project. You didn't say it was worth that much. You didn't ask. Silence. Whitaker glanced toward the dining table. Then back at me. You mentioned we had a meeting tomorrow morning. Yes. Still on schedule? Absolutely. Good. He nodded once. Then he turned back to my parents. For what it's worth, he said calmly, your daughter handled herself with remarkable professionalism tonight. My mother swallowed. Professionalism? Yes. I'm not sure many people would continue cooking dinner for a room full of guests who were actively dismissing their career. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Whitaker checked his watch. I should probably head out soon. My father stepped forward. Daniel. I had no idea Leah was doing work at that level. Whitaker looked at him. That's because you never asked what level she was working at. My father opened his mouth. Then closed it again. Whitaker turned back toward me. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Ms. Morgan. I nodded. 9 a.m. Looking forward to it. He headed toward the door. Guests stepped aside as he passed. Just before leaving, he paused beside me. Quiet enough that only I could hear him, he said. Capabilities shouldn't be confused with obligations. Then he left. The door closed behind him. And suddenly the entire room felt different. My brother stared at the contract on my phone again. You're making more on one project than I make in a year. I guess. My mother looked shaken. Leah, why didn't you tell us any of this? I slipped my phone back into my pocket. I tried. She opened her mouth again. But this time the words didn't come. I glanced around the room. Guests pretending not to stare. Half-finished plates. Coffee cups. The apron still sitting on the table. Then I reached for the doorknob again. Wait, my father said. I paused. We should talk about this. We can. When? Not tonight. My mother's voice softened. Leah, please. I looked at her. For the first time all evening, she didn't look confident. She looked uncertain. But something inside me had already decided. I'll call you later, I said. Then I opened the door. And stepped outside. The cold night air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. For a second I just stood there on the front porch, breathing. Behind me, muffled voices from the party drifted through the closed door. The sound felt distant now, like it belonged to another life. I walked down the driveway slowly. No one followed. That was the strange part. Some part of me had expected my father to rush outside. Or my brother. Or even my mother. But the door stayed closed. I reached my car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel without turning the engine on. My hands rested on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed 5 minutes later. Ethan. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then another call. Mom. Then Dad. I flipped the phone to silent. The house lights glowed warmly across the lawn. Through the front window I could see silhouettes of guests moving around awkwardly. Without the person who had cooked the entire dinner. Without the person who had been quietly running everything all night. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one fixing things. I started the car. By the time I reached the end of the street, my phone had already logged 12 missed calls. When I pulled into my apartment parking lot 20 minutes later, there were 19. I sat in the car for a moment before finally checking the messages. Ethan. Leah, come back. People are asking where the rest of the coffee is. Mom. This is incredibly embarrassing. Please return immediately. Dad. Kiddo, let's talk about this calmly. I stared at the screen. Not one message asked if I was okay. I locked my phone and went upstairs. My apartment was quiet. 2 monitors still glowed on my desk where I had left my design files open earlier that morning. The Aurora Dynamics brand guidelines sat on the screen. Clean typography. Deep midnight blue color palette. Strategic messaging framework. The project that had quietly changed my entire life while I was cooking salmon for 60 people. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from someone else. Aunt Carol. Good for you. I blinked. Then another message arrived. They're scrambling in the kitchen. Your dad just tried to run the coffee maker without a filter. I laughed out loud. Another message followed immediately. Your mom is panicking. Apparently the dishwasher is making strange noises. I sat down on my couch. For the first time all evening, the tension in my shoulders began to fade. Then another text arrived. From my brother. Leah, please answer. Mrs. Bennett is asking about you. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later my phone buzzed again. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Curiosity got the better of me after it ended. I listened. Kiddo, he said quietly. I know tonight got heated. But I'm proud of you. I just wish we'd known sooner. I sat there staring at the phone. Known sooner. The words echoed in my mind. They could have known sooner. They just never asked. Another buzz interrupted my thoughts. This time it was Aunt Carol again. You're not going to believe this. What? I typed back. Apparently Daniel Whitaker stayed after you left. I sat up. Stayed? What happened? 3 dots appeared. Then her reply arrived. He pulled your parents aside in the living room. Oh. I leaned back against the couch. And? Your dad tried to apologize for your behavior. My jaw tightened. What did Whitaker say? A moment passed before the reply came. Carol was clearly enjoying this. He told them he wasn't talking about your behavior. He said he was talking about your career. My heart began beating faster. What did he say exactly? She sent a long message. He said you were the most talented designer Aurora Dynamics interviewed this year. He said the company had been trying to secure you for weeks. He said losing you tonight would be their loss. I exhaled slowly. Then another message appeared. Your mom asked why you never told them about the contract. I knew the answer already. But I still asked. What did he say? The reply came quickly. He said, she tried. You just never listened. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Apparently Sophie's boss was still there when he said it. And? He told Ethan he was lucky to have a sister capable of building a 6-figure brand strategy while cooking dinner for 60 people. I laughed again. It felt strange. Like tension releasing after years of pressure. Then another message came. Also. Sophie dropped the cake while trying to move it. I sat up. What? Cake is on the kitchen floor. Your mom is furious. Someone tried to clean it up with paper towels. It's not going well. I covered my mouth to hide another laugh. Then Carol added one last message. Whitaker left about 10 minutes ago. But before he walked out, he told your dad something else. What? He said talent is easy to miss when you only value careers that look like your own. I leaned back against the couch again. The apartment was quiet. Peaceful. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. I stared at it until the call went to voicemail. Then another buzz. A text. Please call me. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked over to my desk and opened the Aurora contract again. $240,000. Monday morning. 9 a.m. A new chapter. My phone buzzed one more time. Another message from Carol. One last thing. What? Apparently your mom told everyone you were just stressed. I smiled faintly. That sounded exactly like her. But Carol's next message changed that smile into something else. Whitaker corrected her. My heart skipped. What did he say? Her reply came a few seconds later. He said, "No. She's not stressed. She's finally done being underestimated." I looked around my quiet apartment. For the first time in years, I felt like he was absolutely right. Monday morning arrived faster than I expected. At 8:15 a.m., I was standing outside the glass doors of Aurora Dynamics headquarters in downtown Seattle, holding a leather portfolio and wearing the best blazer I owned. The building rose 23 stories into a pale gray morning sky. 6 weeks ago, I had only dreamed about walking into a place like this as a lead consultant. Now I was here to sign a contract worth $240,000. I pushed the doors open. The lobby was sleek and bright, polished concrete floors reflecting the early light pouring through tall windows. A large digital display behind the reception desk scrolled through Aurora's newest projects. A receptionist looked up. "Good morning." "Good morning," I replied. "I'm here to meet Daniel Whitaker." She smiled immediately. "Of course. Ms. Morgan, right?" I blinked. "Yes. He asked me to expect you." She gestured toward the elevators. 21st floor. As the elevator doors closed, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. "Please call me. We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a moment before locking it. Not today. The elevator opened onto a quiet hallway lined with glass offices and conference rooms. Daniel Whitaker was already waiting near the reception desk. He stood when he saw me. Right on time. "Good morning." He extended his hand. "Ready to make things official?" I smiled. "Very." He walked me into a conference room overlooking the skyline. The city stretched across the windows like a living blueprint. "Before we sign anything," he said, sitting across from me, "I want to be clear about something." I raised an eyebrow. "Okay. This contract isn't just about the brand project." He slid another document across the table. "What's this?" "A leadership offer." I scanned the paper. My heart skipped. Brand Director, Aurora Dynamics. Starting salary, $180,000 annually. Plus performance bonuses. Plus team leadership responsibilities. I looked up. "You're serious?" "Completely." "You're offering me a full-time executive role?" "Yes." I blinked twice. "I thought this was a consulting contract." "It was," he said. "But after Saturday night, I realized something." "What?" "You're not just a talented designer." He leaned back slightly. "You're someone who understands how to protect a brand under pressure." I laughed quietly. "You mean during the dinner party?" "Yes. You watched my entire family argue. And you stayed calm." I thought about that night. The apron. The coffee tray. The moment I walked out the door. Whitaker folded his hands. "Leadership isn't about avoiding conflict," he said. "It's about knowing when to draw boundaries." My phone buzzed again on the table. This time the screen lit up with my father's name. Whitaker glanced at it but said nothing. I flipped the phone face down. "Ready to sign?" he asked. I picked up the pen. And signed. The moment the ink dried on the paper, Whitaker smiled. "Welcome to Aurora Dynamics, Leah." Something inside my chest settled into place. For the first time in years, I felt like I had stepped into the life I was meant to build. The fallout from Saturday night didn't take long to spread. By Wednesday, one of the guests had posted about the engagement party online. No names. No photos. Just a story about a family who treated their hardworking daughter like hired help, until a six-figure contract was revealed. The post spread quickly. Hundreds of shares. Thousands of comments. Most of them saying the same thing. Respect people before their success proves you wrong. My brother called twice that week. My father left 3 voicemails. My mother sent 12 messages. I didn't answer immediately. For the first time in my life, I gave myself permission to take space. 2 weeks later, I finally responded. A short email. Subject: boundaries. I wrote, "I'm not angry. I'm hurt. I don't need you to understand my career, but I need you to respect it. For the next 3 months, I won't be attending family gatherings. This isn't punishment. It's space. If we reconnect later, it will be on neutral ground. Somewhere where I'm treated like family, not staff. I love you. But I've learned that loving myself matters too." I pressed send before I could overthink it. 3 minutes later my mother replied. "We're sorry. We didn't understand." That sentence lingered on my screen for a long time. But something Whitaker said during our meeting stayed with me. People understand success when it fits their expectations. Sometimes they just need time to see it clearly. 6 weeks later, my father asked if we could meet for coffee. Neutral ground. 1 hour. Just like I'd written. When they walked into the cafe, they looked older somehow. Or maybe I was just seeing them differently. My father spoke first. "We're proud of you, Leah." It was the first time I had ever heard him say those words about my work. My mother nodded quietly. "I'm sorry," she said. "We should have asked more questions." I didn't forgive everything immediately. Healing doesn't work that way. But we started talking again. Slowly. Carefully. And months later, when Ethan and Sophie finally held their wedding reception, I attended as a guest. Not the caterer. Not the maid. Just family. Ethan introduced me to his co-workers proudly. "This is my sister Leah," he said. "She's the brand director at Aurora Dynamics." It wasn't perfect. But it was progress. And sometimes progress is enough. If you've made it this far into the story, thank you for watching Women Reddit Stories. If you believe that respecting yourself is more important than keeping the peace, make sure you subscribe to Women Reddit Stories for more powerful stories like this. And if you've ever had to set boundaries with people who underestimated you, comment, "I know my worth." Because sometimes the hardest thing you can do is walk out the door. But sometimes, that's exactly how you walk into the life you deserve.